This month's exclusive video is a deeper dive into the Giverny sketch that I did on YouTube recently. So this pen that I've been using, I don't know whether to call it a pen or a marker or a brush pen, but we did discover who made it and how to get it. And here is what I love about this one. And don't worry, I'm going to get into kind of like how I'm making these marks, how I'm holding the pen, etc. I'm really enjoying this one right now because of two reasons. It has the most amazing spring to it. It's flexible. Well, maybe three reasons. It has real bristles, which y'all know is definitely something I think is really important with a brush pen. And while it releases its color when you wet it, it doesn't like explode and get things completely out of control. So I would highly recommend giving this one a try. The whole set you can get on Amazon US, and it's something like $27. So that's actually a little more affordable than I paid when I was in France. Anywho, let's talk about not so much the composition making of this particular sketch, because we covered that in the YouTube video. But for you, my dear patrons, I want to go more into the actual way that I approach the pressure and the hold of this pen when I'm sketching. This pen, because it's so flexible, and at first it may even feel like, whoa, a little out of control because of its flexibility. But when you compare it to the sign pens, the Pentel sign pens I've been talking a lot about, the actual bristles are shorter, which kind of gives you back some of that control. Anywho, it's going to be extremely responsive to pressure. And it's inky enough. There's this kind of constant flow of ink coming, not dripping, but it's always just juicy enough that when you press your very hardest, you're still getting a pretty solid filled in line, which is really nice. And that is a difference from the Pentel sign pen. When I press my hardest on that one, because it's longer bristled, it tends to kind of fan out more those bristles and give me more of a dry brush technique. So I just wanted to explain the difference a little bit. The thing is, if you want to try this kind of look, if you love the line quality you're seeing in this sketch, you're going to want to get your hands on some type of bristle brush marker / pen. You can certainly use just ink and dip like a number 2 round brush in that ink. That will work too. But the one benefit of using a brush pen, brush marker, whatever you want to call it, is that there's just this nice, easy, consistent presence of the ink you need, where you don't have to really at all worry about moisture or water control. All right. So at this point in the video, I am adding the weeping willows, and I am using what I call a almost perpendicular hold. And this is a hold that I use very often, both when I'm painting and when I'm sketching. And you'll notice that I am holding it very far down on the marker. And even as I continue here, when I'm adding the stream, same kind of hold. And I've got my thumb as the main brace and my pointer finger as the main brace. And it's almost like I can hinge the marker between those two fingers. And then my middle finger is just there just in case I need any extra support. But again, just a couple things to notice. The hand hold that you might want to try. You may not end up liking this hand hold, but it's worth a try. Further down on the marker, like way far down. Like you're holding this thing somewhere in the first like 1.25 inches from the bristles. And you are using that thumb pointer finger grip with just your middle finger there to kind of like catch a fall, so to speak. All right. And then the hold is nearly perpendicular. Now, I don't remember geometry. I don't remember actually what degree angle it is, so I'm not going to go there. But it's pretty straight up and down to the point that any point in this video, watch out for this, where I'm almost obscuring what I'm sketching completely because of my hand isn't because my hand is in the way, that is a perpendicular hold. So might just be something you want to try, and here's why. For me, this hold gives me control, really, really amazing control over the amount of pressure I'm applying to the paper. Something you might notice I do a lot as I sketch is that I'm kind of bouncing or ricocheting off the area that I'm working on. And I don't know of a better way to describe this in a word or two. Now, let me try to describe it in more than a word or two. So, for example, I'm down here, I'm working on the flower. I may start at the center, but I then quickly bounce or flow to a petal or two, and then I bounce or flow to part of the stem, and then I may bounce over to finish up, the full kind of spray of petals and so on and so forth. And maybe bounce isn't the best word, but there's a certain flow to the way that I sketch. I am not stopping often to contemplate the next petal or placement. I am just kind of leaning into my knowledge of the general structure of a flower, which, trust me, isn't terribly scientific, and running with that. Here, for example, where I am sketching Monet's The Bridge, the famous bridge, I am just relying on my memory of what that bridge looked like. And just knowing that it has a slight arch. It's not a straight bridge across the water. And I don't really remember how many vertical wooden slats there were versus horizontal. And I don't really care. And I think this is where I am able to consistently push away fear, because I rarely feel like I must rely on an inspiration photo. Now, this could be a huge shift in approach for you. And it may be one that you really didn't even know you needed, but you need so bad. And let me explain why. Inspiration photos are fantastic, but they're fantastic when you have a specific goal in mind. If learning composition is a goal and you're working from, say, a professional photographer's work, who obviously has a lot of background with composition, awesome. Follow their composition. Inspiration photos are fantastic if you are going after realism and you don't want light to be changing and working outside and so on and so forth. Great. But if you are looking to just capture the essence of something, if you are looking to create a sense of looseness, which we so often talk about on my channel and in this membership, then an inspiration photo may not be your best choice. Maybe even just think about it this way. Glancing at a photo, let's say you're working for a half hour. Maybe glancing at that photo twice during that half hour is all you need to then go back to your sketch. And then that sense of not being held down to the specifics of a photo will give you kind of more of that mental freedom to do the bouncing and to do the imperfect lines and to create the kind of hybrid composition like you see here unfolding. I just finished up this kind of twisting, like grapevine type detail area here, and I'm about to add more in the upper right from memory. I think that's what I do next. And this is an incredible exercise for learning how to capture the idea that something is intertwining. So whether it be vines, whether it be leaves that are kind of wrapping around one another. And so, yes, you'll see me do it up here. So two lines that mirror one another that ultimately come to a point of some sort. And then another one that starts to go behind, you skip the area where you drew the previous and you continue on. And you really just repeat that kind of approach. And eventually you'll see this like creepy, crawly, viney, intertwiny kind of thing start to happen. I would suggest if you really love this look and want to be able to apply it in a lot of different scenarios, to take like a 4x6, because I think anything larger would be overwhelming and you'd get bored, and try to fill that 4x6 piece of paper with intertwining vines or branches or both. Or if you're a leaf fan, have it be like long, skinny leaves that are curling around each other, and see what you can kind of carve out of that 4x6 paper using this technique I just described. Take notice here, another detail I love to add are just little spirals. And they're, of course, something you see in real life with grapevines, and they just look like little curly cues. And here we go. I'm going to start to add them now. They're just so fun, and they give things a sense of whimsy, but at the same time, a naturalistic feel. I'm not going to say realistic because there's nothing realistic about this situation here, but learning how to do those little curly cues. And here I'm doing another. Notice the perpendicular hold. You can barely see what I'm actually putting on the paper. And that's because right there, I'm doing that perpendicular hold. And to do those curly cues with some amount of control, I find personally the perpendicular hold to work really well. So that might be another thing to try. Again, on a 4x6, anything bigger is going to feel like too much, too long. Yeah. And fill that page with as many or as long and continuous of a curly cue. Think of like a corkscrew kind of shape. Try that out. You will build muscle memory. You will build a confidence with the hold on the marker that works best for you. And filling a 4x6 piece of a sketchbook paper or watercolor paper is not going to take you very long. So it's going to be something that the trade-off, the time for, benefit trade-off is going to be huge. So adding this type of perspective area in these hybrid sketches, or in any sketch for that matter, is so satisfying and very, very much to the end of getting that sense of depth. And so whether it's a field of grapes, like a vineyard, a field of grapes, goodness gracious, or in this case, it was just row after row after row of potted bulbs at Monet's garden. But using a vanishing point in your landscape or organic sketches is so powerful. And we saw a little bit of that earlier when I added the stream, and I definitely used the vanishing point in that little part of the sketch. But it can create so much depth and interest. And you can already see it happening, even though I haven't finished that section. And just take notice also, these rows don't look like just straight angular lines. They've got a little bounce, a little flare. Parts of the lines aren't continuous. There's some spacing in between. So I just find that to be a great addition. A vanishing point, just to cover it, I've talked about it a lot on YouTube, but to cover it again, it's basically where all things converge in the distance of a landscape composition. Now, it can also happen in other places other than landscapes, but landscapes is what we know really well where it happens. So you might have, a freshly mown lawn by a professional where there's the rows just mowed and mowed and mowed. If you stand back far enough from that view, you're going to see those rows converge at a point. And that point is your vanishing point. Same thing with a pathway that winds into the far distance of a view that you're looking at. Also a stream or any kind of, body of water that kind of meanders is going to have a vanishing point. Really, really powerful visual element in sketches. I want to talk about line quality because it's so important. And I do talk about it a lot on YouTube, but I want to go in more depth here. Line quality is something that I was made aware of in college, my freshman year. And I'll tell you a little story because it was an ego moment for Christy. Okay. I went into college with a big head. I had been praised for years by my art teacher, Sue Hand, telling me how awesome I was. I would win ribbons at all the art shows, blah, blah, blah. I walked into college with a big head thinking that I just had it all figured out. And I did not realize that the metaphor about, the sea and the fish and the little fish and the big sea and the little sea and all that was about to smack me in the face. And so I went in with techniques that I knew well, that I could produce securely, and I used them over and over and over again. And my teachers, not just one teacher, but multiple teachers noticed this. And good for them, they were pushing me. They were pushing me to step outside of my comfort zone in terms of my technique. And one of the things that was brought up was my line quality. And, at this point, I had probably been criticized fairly heavily by a multitude of teachers, and I was not feeling terribly good about myself. So it took me a while to hear this. And line quality is when the line that you draw, it doesn't look the same thickness across the entire length of the line you draw. And you can see that evidenced here in this sketch again and again and again. I might make one swoopy, swirly line that is the edge of a tulip as it's opening, like, for example, in that kind of rightmost third of this composition. But that line, even though it was made continuously without lifting my brush pen, my marker, whatever we're going to call it, it doesn't have the same thickness of line. It has a varied line quality. And this teacher brought it up to me, and it was eventually, when I actually was listening, and a huge aha moment for me, because the amount of personality and just je ne sais quoi, woohoo, that you can add to an otherwise ho-hum sketching situation with just a varied line quality approach is mind-boggling. Okay. As a matter of fact, sometimes I will go into a illustration, or even this applies to paintings as well, and it might be feeling a little ho-hum. Maybe there's an area that I want it to pop and it's not popping. I will go in with the mindset of, let's liven up the line quality. Let's darken some areas that are looking more like cartoonish outlines, and let's change them up so they look more just like very fun impressionistic moments that have a lot of variation with the thickness of the line that's used to create the form. So I'm really hoping that little spiel, long-winded story helps you understand how important line quality can be, especially while watching me create this piece that up until now you only got to see kind of the surface experience of. So I mentioned in the YouTube video that I couldn't stand the way I had written Giverny. I wrote it once, didn't like it, and then I tried to darken it and do like the faux calligraphy, didn't like it. So I let it cure as I sketched through the rest of the composition, and now you'll see me going back in with the bleed proof white. Really important here. Bleed proof white will pick up and re-wet areas of paint, ink, depending on the type of ink. And you have to be careful because you could have a gray kind of situation happen, if you know what I mean. So I used a really light touch. I did not scrub my brush back and forth. I tried to keep it going in one direction. And I was able to get that accomplished, get my whites back, edit some of the silhouettes of these letters that I sketched out or wrote out earlier without creating a mess. So a lot of times friction and pressure can cause you a lot of trouble when you're trying to edit something. Keep that in mind. Friction and pressure can be great in creating expressive textures and expressive line quality. But if you're trying to edit something or go over top of something, you want to be more light-handed. All right, grab those 4x6-inch pieces of paper, do some of the exercises mentioned earlier, friends, and don't be afraid of the sketching.